Part 4, I'm going to talk about pages 24 to 29 on, again, first language learning in Chapter 1. And going to the third school of thought, the interactional or developmental perspective on first language learning, obviously this is going to focus on interaction, social interaction, which will apply to what we want to do with ESL as well, where we have a lot of communication and expressing meaning and what's your opinion of this and why do you believe that. Kind of like critical thinking, meaning thinking. Critical thinking means use your head and form your ideas. And learning from experience as well. The interesting thing is with this school of thought, they don't really need the LAD. They don't believe you have to have a part of your brain for language. They feel that language learning is just, as you develop as a person, you just learn language just like you learn everything else that you're learning, and how to drive and how to cook and all the things that you're learning. And because if you think about it, I mean, like painting a picture, is that, more or less complex than using language? And of course the environment here is everything. So this was popularized by Jean Piaget, 1951, so a pretty early date, and focusing a lot on meaning, that language is to communicate meaning that you have, and a lot of thinking going on. Also Lev Vygotsky, 1978, from the Soviet Union, back to the 1920s and 30s, though also doing the research of how important it is to have, supportive environment for all the social interaction, working together with people, becoming part of a society, using language to form your identity as a person in a society. And that also ties into the connection between language and culture. And we know that language comes from a culture usually, and that they're interconnected. And as you learn the language, you learn the culture at the same time. I always say, imagine learning Japanese or Arabic and going to that country without any concern for the culture. Imagine how unsuccessful you'd be just trying to use words and language, but having like the American body language or American mindset, American attitude. It could be offensive, actually. So obviously the deeper you understand the culture, then the language kind of has much more meaning. There's a famous Sapir-Whorf hypothesis which supports that, talking about how connected language and culture are, and that even the words we have for emotions or the words we have for beliefs, obviously food, the words we have for food, come from that culture. Even could be like your values and things. One expression, which is the zone of proximal development, that's just the idea that a student can learn a lot more in a group than just as an individual. It's kind of like the 1 + 1 = 3 idea of that when we work together, we can do much more than just the two of us, individually could put together. Like the synergy concept of creating synergy, the energy of a group. And then scaffolding is a common term. Scaffolding is really supporting. Think of scaffolding on a building when they're working on the outside of a building and they have all those ladders and things and bridges. So in terms of learning, scaffolding is just sort of making sure a student's not over their head in the learning process, giving them a lot of support, not giving them things that are going to be too hard for them to do like at that stage. For example, when we speak to children, we use what is termed as child-directed speech. And we simplify our language, which we also do as ESL teachers. We simplify our language, obviously, depending on the students. In fact, ESL teachers are criticized sometimes for, spoon-feeding the students or being too easy on them. And then even, it's funny because even after class, sometimes ESL teachers speak, they go home and they talk to their wife and children, or husband and wife, husband, using this kind of simplified language. And their spouse says, you can talk normally with me. I mean, I'm sure I do the same thing, kind of over enunciate things. But yeah, that's what we do with kids, and that creates what we call like a comprehensible input. A lot of people ask me, how can you go from a beginning class to an advanced class in the same day and just like automatically adjust your language? And that is a skill that you pick up over time, is the ability to adjust your language to whatever class you're teaching. Typically in the community, just a typical community member will, our students, ESL students, will have a lot more trouble understanding them, like when they're shopping and things, than their teacher. Sometimes they say that, like, we understand you, teacher, but we can't understand, my host mother or something. And that's true, because we've learned how to say things in ways that people can understand. Also, when you correct a student, well, we talked before about sometimes we can't really, students always say, correct me every time I make a mistake, but we can't really interrupt them all the time. But there's a lot of techniques for error correction, like maybe I model the correct way and see if you pick it up, or maybe I say, do you know what mistake you just made with that verb tense, and students can like self-correct. There's some cultures, I think it's very rare, but some cultures, the adults don't speak to the kids at all. Like the parents don't even talk to the kids. It's like they're too low. The kids are too low for that. But I think that's pretty rare. They mentioned in this book a couple of like Inuit or Papua New Guinea, like where the parents don't speak to the kids. So the only language the kids hear maybe be like from other siblings and other kids. But normally, like, we get that, adult language. And of course, with television, kids get a lot of input from television, and our students get a lot of input from movies that they watch. A lot of people wonder why students don't learn more from movies, and it is interesting that students don't learn as much English as you would think just from watching a lot of American TV or American movies or English. And that's mainly because it's a very passive experience. When I'm watching a movie, there's no pressure on me to answer or respond, so my brain just kind of checks out, and I just like enjoy the action or the story. They might read the subtitles though, kind of do some reading. That would be good. And obviously they're picking up cultural things, and they're picking up like intonation. Definitely, I'm sure they're picking up a lot. But there's nothing like that, like real person interacting back and forth to learn language. And again, usage-based learning, learn by doing, learning to create associations between different words, connecting words to reality in terms of what you're seeing. Like all of the things we think of when you're sort of really learning language connected to real things. So that's the end of part 4, and there's one more part.